Welcome to our webinar. This week we're doing things a little bit differently and we've pre-taped it, but we'll still have a chance to get a lot of good information and lots of spooky information. I'm Erin Selby. I'm the Education Director for UFCW Local 832. And every month we put on a different topic in our normal SOFA series. And this month, because it's right before Halloween, we thought we'd learn a little bit more about Winnipeg's spooky background. And joining us to do that today is Kristen Treusch. Kristen, how did I do on your last name?
Well, it's pretty scary.
That was the first scary thing. Kristen is from SquarePeg Tours, and normally you would take people around and they'd actually get to see some of these things, but today we're going to do it a little bit differently. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. And I'm going to turn it over to you because I'm prepared to be very scared. Thanks for being here, and you go right ahead.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Kristen Treusch, and I've been doing paranormal tours as a topic since about 2008. And as I've been going through the years, basically they have literally taken on a life of their own, no pun intended, actually totally. But yeah, it's been one of those weird journeys, you know, I mean, where you not only learn about a building's heritage, architecture, and, you know, who was in there and that sort of thing. But, you know, taking it to another level where you learn a little bit more about ghosts, you know. And for me, it was always about, like, you know, do they exist, you know, this sort of thing. So I love this subject because, you know, you can think about this subject matter on so many levels, whether it be science, you know, physics, metaphysics, spirituality, history, folklore, and so on. So I will cover a few of the well-known buildings and a few less well-known buildings here in our city and what kind of stories are connected to them when it comes to paranormal phenomena. In the end, I guess it's up to you to decide whether or not this stuff is real or not. Although it does make for some very good dinner conversation, or even better, campfire discussions and that sort of thing. So let's not wait any longer and let's just delve right into it. All right. So the first building I want to share with you is the Manitoba legislature. And indeed, the legislature has been around for almost 100 years. And well, yeah, I guess it's a little over 100 years now. And it's beautiful in terms of its architectural design. And you know, it's Beaux-Arts architecture. Anyway, it was finished about 1919, and you know, since then we've had a number of reports of people, specifically we're talking security guards, people who work here during the day, and so on, that they've experienced some odd things, to put it lightly. For example, when security guards are left to their own devices from 8 o'clock in the evening until when it reopens to the public the next morning, they will do their security checks about every 45 minutes or so. And they've experienced all kinds of stuff. We're talking about ghostly footsteps, doors slamming after they've already locked them. They've heard children giggling and sounds like they're running around and playing in the basement. They actually have a bathroom diva haunting the Manitoba legislature. Apparently, it's thought that she was a former cleaning lady and that when she worked at the ledge, she would clean and sing, I guess just to pass the time and make it a little bit more pleasurable. But after she died, it seems she's still visiting the legislature, maybe checking up to see if the staff are doing just as good a job at maintaining the cleanliness, maybe, you know, up to her standards. And and people know that she's stopping by because they hear her singing. So a bathroom diva in the ledge. We've also got a librarian, and she looks totally real. Nobody actually knows that she's a spirit until when it comes time to actually close up the library. So staff, you know, will go over and, excuse me, ma'am, they'll say, it's 5 o'clock, we need to close up. Can we save your stuff for you for the next time you're here? And the woman sitting there will just look at you, smile, and fade away. So as you can imagine, that can be a little unnerving for some folks. So that's our librarian in the building. Definitely the children in the basement, I think, are probably, I suppose, a little bit more creepy than most. I don't know what it is about ghost children. It just takes us, the whole paranormal normal thing to another level to me. But yeah, so apparently there have been two boys that have been seen and heard running around and playing downstairs in the basement. And one night, a security guard was doing his rounds, and as he was going down the corridor, he actually saw two children inside one of the offices with their hands cupped around their eyes, pressing up against the window, looking at him like, "What are you doing here at 3 in the morning?" So security was like, this is not right. And I mean, you can imagine they're thinking like multiple things all at once. But anyway, so he has to phone for a secondary security guard because it looks like there's an intruder. So by the time the second guy comes down, the children are no longer standing in the doorway or in the window. And so, nevertheless, they go, they unlock it, they enter, they turn on the light, and they start looking for these children. And I suppose it's not a big surprise, but no children were found in the office. But that first guy swears that he saw what he saw. And, a lot of other people have talked about hearing kids running around and playing down there. So I don't think he's getting laughed at much anyway at the legislature. So very interesting little bit of stories there, in terms of all of its history and people that have come and gone throughout that building. I can't say for sure, like, how or why these spirits are there, but they just seem to have gravitated. I mean, other than the cleaning lady one, or maybe the librarian, the other ones, we're not really sure what the connection is. I mean, why would there be children in the legislature? So that I can't answer that for you at this point. So my next building, well, maybe is a one that's a little bit known. Well, I'll have a look. Well, this one's actually out of town, and this was known as Captain Kennedy's Tea House. This is a historic site today. It's owned by, I think it's the province of Manitoba, and it's a museum because of, obviously who lived there. But and it was a fellow, I'm trying to remember now. You'll have to forgive me. The name escapes me at the moment, but he traveled a lot, and his wife, who was Métis, was said to be seen often standing by the window looking out over the river, hoping to catch a glimpse of him returning from Scotland and doing his overseas trading, because he worked for the Hudson's Bay Company in the early 1800s. So unfortunately, some records suggested that she was so distraught of his, because he was just never coming home, that she may have killed herself, by walking into the river with pockets full of stones. So, kind of pulling a little bit of a Virginia Woolf sort of thing. But I think that's a little bit more urban legend than fact. But what I can tell you is that the woman who has been spotted in there has, they think she might have been the spirit that they see might be the actual former owner, the wife. They've also talked about having, excuse me, a little girl has been seen on the second floor. And there used to be sort of the staircase, and it's closed off with a door now. But I know that the lady who used to run the restaurant, the tea house part of it, Val Brown, talked about experiencing a little girl ghost upstairs in that area quite often. And she's very timid. Even on some of the investigations, I've even tried to get her to engage in activities with us, but she's just not that kind of a ghost, I suppose. And so she likes to stay a little bit more in the background. There's also a spirit of a former gardener who has been seen outside on the property, just slightly over to the side of the house. And there's a little pond there, but people have reported seeing a man over there working as if attending to a garden. So our next building will be also, let me see now, in the city. So I'm just going to flip here. we'll just skip this one a little bit up. This one here, I think some of you may recognize. This one here is the St. Boniface Museum. And this is a beautiful museum and old building. It is one of the oldest in the city. And it was originally the first hospital in Western Canada. And it was run by the Grey Nuns and they came out from Montreal. This would be about the 1840s, 1850s or so. Anyway, this has a number of different types of spirits that are said to be in the building. We're talking about former nuns, a priest, children, nurses, patients, some indigenous spirits. I mean, it covers quite a breadth of kinds of people. But on the various tours that I've done, I've talked about things that staff have experienced there. For example, once in a blue moon, a rocking chair on the second floor has been known to start rocking to and fro when there's nobody standing near it or in the chair itself. We've also got stories of hearing children giggling upstairs on the second floor. And that would have been one section on the north side. It was where actually a lot of children were housed. There has been one lady, Sarah, she worked there for many years when she was a student. And she was in the chapel part of the hospital. And apparently there was a great big box made of plexiglass. It's like a display case. And she was in there and she's dusting it off and stuff. And it was getting pretty close to closing time when she felt a tapping on her shoulder. So she just assumed somebody was coming to let her know that it was time to go. So she turned around and there was nobody there. And the distance between where she stood in the middle of that room to where the door was, there's no way anybody could have just taken off without her hearing them running, because it's old wood floors, or B, the distance is too far for them to move that fast, or disappear that quickly. So Sarah was very unnerved, I guess you could say, by that experience. And indeed, people often visit the museum and they do feel taps on their shoulders and this sort of thing. There have been various aromas that have been also picked up in this museum, and the scents have actually been identified with specific spirits. So for example, when the smell of incense is noticed, people understand that to be the priest that comes in. Likewise, other people have picked up the smell of antiseptic. This is before COVID, of course. And so they actually never had antiseptic on the main floor in the museum or anything. And so it's thought that that scent is connected to a spirit that was a nurse when she was living, possibly a nun, but most definitely a nurse. And others have talked about smelling baking, flowers, the smell of a candle after it's been blown out and you've got just the smoking wick. So all these really interesting aromas. But what is really fascinating about this is the fact that there haven't been candles or incense lit in that museum, in that building, in decades. So as to what's creating these smells, that's where it gets to be rather a curious thing. I remember hearing a story from one of the staff who talked about upstairs on the second floor, there's like a kitchen sort of a thing. And sometimes people can book a time and they can sit in that kitchen space and have teas and or a workshop or that sort of thing. And sometimes the staff will go up there and they'll set up the tables, and get the teacups and everything out and set up. But the thing is, the teacups are set up in such a way that the cups are upright. Pardon me, but there's a spooky cat working its way across the screen. So we'll just boot him out of the way. Sorry. So anyways, they get it all set up, but the cups, of course, on the saucers are open upright. So after they come back after about an hour, they find that somehow cups have been actually inverted and are turned upside down. And they believe that there's a specific spirit, a sister, a nun, Sister Lagrave specifically, who, when she would set up the teacups when she was alive, well over 140 years ago, it was proper etiquette to have the cups turned downward. And so when the young people today set up the room and they fail to put the cups on the saucers correctly, she apparently will turn them over so that they are dust free and ready for service. So indeed, so that's a kind of a helpful spirit. So that's a few stories with regards to St. Boniface Museum. And if you haven't been there, I want to recommend that you definitely go there and check it out. I'm just going to bring you to another building. This one here is downtown in the Exchange District. As you'll see in the signage, it says Walker. Most people know it today as the Burton Cummings Theater, but the Walker is what I still call it. And the Walkers were actually Americans who came into Winnipeg, oh gosh, I guess around 1904, 1905, somewhere in there, and decided to invest in a major theater. Now, around this time, Winnipeg had about 14 vaudeville theaters, but nothing quite to this level in terms of a theater of this caliber. So this was very, very advanced. This was very, very impressive for its time. Now, lots of big names came through Winnipeg, you know, and performed at these different theaters. But apparently there was a couple from Britain who had been doing a Canadian tour. They're actors. Her name was Mabel Hackney, and his name was Irving Fleming, something like that. Can't quite remember his name. But anyway, so they did this Canadian tour, and they finished it off by performing here at the Walker, and loved it. They just loved the theater. They loved the Winnipeg audience, and everything was absolutely amazing for them. So what happens is on their way home, they had a terrible tragedy. In fact, it's one of the worst maritime disasters on record for Canada. Now, everybody's heard of the Titanic, but this one actually has a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? It has a lot of comparison between the Titanic and this disaster. So what happens is they get on a ship to head back overseas. And as they do so, they are on the Empress of Ireland, and the ship collides with a shipping ship, and it hit the passenger ship so hard that it created a disaster, and basically it sank in the St. Lawrence Seaway. And Mabel Hackney and her husband both perished in the icy cold waters. And I've even heard that more people died from that disaster than on the Titanic, and yet we've never heard of it. So yeah, the Empress of Ireland. And so people today think that it's those ghosts that have returned to the Walker and are still haunting it to this day. And things that they've been known to do would be things like moving people's costumes. They are, maybe responsible for keeping certain doors open, other doors like the ones downstairs in the basement where they do their not dress rehearsals, but where they get dressed, their dressing rooms, that those doors are supposed to remain open, but somehow they keep closing, and ghostly footsteps and this sort of thing. Now, this is just, speculation, of course, but this seems to be quite a consistent idea behind what or who may be haunting the place. The other thing is about this beautiful building is that the theater, this is one of the old original photos of it. The top balcony has often been referred to as the gods because you're so high up that it's like practically being in heaven. And anyway, so when there are stage crews and the actors and everybody are practicing on the stage, it is said that people have actually heard ghostly audiences applauding from the gods during rehearsals. So I suppose that's a good thing because, you know, it's always nice to have a little encouragement, even if they are dead. If you can please them, then I suppose you can please just about anybody. One of the other bizarre stories I know about this place was that I remember speaking to someone from the theater itself, and they were telling me this story about a security guard who had a bit of a problem one night. And apparently, this guy actually had a guard dog with him. And this dog and this guy had been through the theater many, many times. But on this particular night, the guard is doing his rounds, and all of a sudden, this German Shepherd is behaving very oddly and is actually cowering away from certain parts of the theater and won't go, and is like whimpering and trying to pull away. And the security guard is like, what's going on? Like, he's pulling the dog and dog won't go, and this sort of thing. And it, you know, the only thing I can account for that is that, you know, they say that cats and dogs, maybe other animals, but these ones specifically, have the ability to sense or see spirit. So perhaps the dog was getting upset because it was seeing something that the security guard couldn't see, and he did not want to venture into that space. So that has been noted as happening at the Walker Theatre as well. Now, let us continue with our images. I may have to switch over to something different, but that's all right. One of my favorites would be the former Vaughan Street Jail. And I'm going to just see if I have that picture. Oh yeah, let's talk about this one. This is just by the jail. This it may be a little pixelated, but this building is still standing today. It's a little bit different in the facade, but this is known as the Provincial Archives today. But originally, when it was built in 1932, it was to become the Civic Auditorium, which means this building housed the art gallery, the concert hall, and the museum for Winnipeggers. And it was actually a make work project during the Great Depression. And, you know, this was basically where a lot of the English elite of town would go for their entertainment. Now, by 1970, Manitoba turned 100 years old. So they decided, they, meaning the province, the city, decided to spill a lot of money into new projects, such as the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the Centennial Concert Hall, and the Manitoba Museum. So not to render the building useless, they converted it into the Provincial Archives. So if you have anybody in the group that likes to do any research, this is a great place to do it, especially if you want a really unique Christmas gift. For example, if you have an older house, you could go to the archives, or you could go to the library, the Millennium Library, and you can ask for the Henderson directories. And that'll give you the name and occupation, and a few other little details about every person that resided in your house, going as far back as before anyone actually lived in it, maybe just the year it was built. And this sort of thing. So it's a really kind of a fun thing. I've done it myself for family to get as a Christmas gift. But I digress. So the archives, yes, lots of stories there. Now the archives is actually at the corner of Memorial and York. And, I guess it's Memorial and St. Mary Avenue. And oh gosh, yeah, it's got lots of stories actually. So for example, because it's provincially owned, I guess at this point now, they have security guards there 24/7. And when they're sitting at their security desks in the middle of the night, they've got their little TV monitors. And apparently once in a blue moon, they will see a misty figure of a woman in a restricted room. So naturally they have to go and investigate. So they get up, they walk over, they unlock the door, and they enter. And nobody's in the room. So there's that theme again. And so they end up, of course, just locking up and leaving. But again, it's the same issue where people see certain things in certain areas. But again, there's no logic behind the incident to better understand what is actually happening here. So that's a lady in white. They describe her as lady in white in these restricted rooms. There's also a gentleman ghost who wears a top hat and a frock coat, probably has a beard, and he's often seen standing next to a particular old grandfather clock, right? It's a beautiful big old thing, and it's in the archive section of the building. And apparently some people have thought he was real and thought, oh, this is kind of a neat thing that, there's got somebody there dressed up and all this stuff. But anyway, apparently one day they had a medium who happened to be doing some personal research and this sort of thing there. And she went to the staff and commented about this guy. And I think they were a bit surprised that, another person yet again has spotted this guy. And anyways, she just explained that this is what she could do. And she asked about, have they been made aware that there's a spirit standing in the room next to the grandfather clock. Anyways, they acknowledged that yes, they've heard stories and people have made comments. So she said that she was under the impression that the spirit was the previous owner of this clock, and therefore he has attached himself to said clock. So that might be something you might want to keep in your mind if you like to go antique shopping. You might be buying a little more than just the rocking chair. It might be bringing with it grandma that belonged to somebody. So yeah, just kind of think about that. Now, what's interesting is that apparently the grandfather clock in the archives originally belonged to George Simpson. I think that was his name. The Simpson guy that brought stuff into Lower Fort Garry and this sort of thing. Ugh, my brain is not working so hot today. But nevertheless, it turns out the guy in spirit isn't actually the previous owner. So that I'm thinking maybe he's just some spirit wandering around the building going, ooh, nice clock. I think I'll attach myself to that. Who knows? But he likes that clock and he's often been seen standing there. Now, one of my favorite little stories about spirit activity does in fact come from that building. Staff have reported that they have a ghost that they call Archie. How they came up with the name, I don't know, but they call this one particular spirit Archie. And Archie loves to play around with people's desks in the middle of the night. So imagine you come to work the next morning and all your paper clips and pencils and a few other little things get moved and are actually laid out nicely on your table with one significant difference. They're actually taped down to the tabletop. Archie likes to play with Scotch tape. So now, even if you doubt this story, and I'm just sort of relaying information I've read or heard about, I was doing this story on the bus that I do in October, the bus tour, and I just told the story. And there's a guy sitting on the bus somewhere in the middle there, and he's smiling and he's bobbing his head up and down like this. And I said, "Oh, you've heard this story, have you?" And he says, "Heard it." No, I work there, and it's totally true. So clearly he or someone he knows experienced Archie's interesting organizational skills. But, and that was maybe 8 to 10 years ago. So that's the Provincial Archives for you. Now I'm just going to see, oops, did I just do something wrong here? One moment. Not sure what happened there, but let's try that again. And, oh, there we go. All right, that looks a little bit better. I suspect I'm going to need to switch my photo albums. So I will see how I do that. So bear with me for just one moment. As I scroll through, I have a lot of photographs. And one of my favorite buildings is the Vaughan Street Jail. This is actually the South Wing. Now, I have actually written a book on the history of the Vaughan Street Jail. And if you haven't had the chance to explore or visit the jail, The only time the public can get into it would be in May during an event called Doors Open Winnipeg. And it is free to the public, and I organize the activities, etc., here at this venue. So if you want to check it out, definitely watch for it in May. So anyways, a little history on the Vaughan Street Jail. The jail was built in 1881. The oldest sections are the parts that face north, the east and west wings. And this jail housed not just male criminals, but also women and children and people suffering from mental illness. Those people were often called lunatics at the time. Children as young as 5 years old were incarcerated here. And yeah, I know a lot of people are just like, what? And it's, yeah, it's actually a lot more common than you'd think. The two top reasons why you could have such young children incarcerated would be for petty theft and crimes like stealing food for survival. And the second reason would be for truancy. So, you know, kids cut in class, and it was a crime and they could end up in the jail. Now, the section that you're looking at here is called the South Wing, and it was added in 1910 so they could separate the women and the children from the male population, because they did at one time share cells in the East Wing. And people actually could meet their end here for a number of reasons, such as murder, suicide, accidents, childbirth, disease, various things like that, and of course, lawful hanging. So in Canada, we executed roughly a little over 600 men and 13 women. This Vaughan Street Jail spot here had 15 executions. Only one woman was ever hanged in Manitoba, and that was Hilda Blake, and that was done in Brandon in 1899. But at this jail, no women, no children were executed. Now, these executions took place on the other side of the South Wing that you're seeing here. Today, it is a parking lot. And currently, the building is sitting pretty much idle. 3/4 of it is not being utilized. Just the first floor is being used by government services for maintenance. So from this position, standing on Memorial Boulevard and looking directly up at the South Wing, you will notice on the left a very obvious white square in one of the windows. And that's because you're actually looking right through the building. There are no walls in that section, no cells, no electricity, no heat, nothing. And so they've ripped it all out and it's just a shell. So imagine, if you will, I was standing kind of where I am, where this photo was taken, about, I guess, sometime in about 2002. And just like you can see through the building on that window, in the window on the left, I was able to do the same thing, but on the window on the right. So above the door and one to the right is where I could see through the building. And as it turns out, I was standing on the sidewalk and I actually saw the silhouette of a woman walk right by. She was wearing period clothing, and I thought they were using the building as a film site again, because it has been used for various things. And I just assumed that she'd come down the stairs and carry on. So as I was standing there, I did find it a bit peculiar, to be honest. And I saw her down to her waistline. So what happens is I gather my few people together from Heritage Winnipeg and the province, because they own the building. And I wanted to take them inside and start sharing with them some of the early information that I was gathering on the history of this particular building. So we go in, up the stairs we go, security guard pulls out a key and he unlocks the door to the second floor. So without really thinking about it, I just turned to the guy and I said, hey, you know, has this door been locked all day? And he's like, yeah, I'm the only one with the key. Oh, I said, so how did the woman get upstairs about 10 minutes ago? And he's like, woman, there's no women in the building. So I don't say another word because I'm trying to impress people here. And I'm looking like the local lunatic running around the building. So I don't say another word. But when I walked up to that very same window that I saw her down to her waist, I actually stood there and the bottom of the window frame comes up to here on me. and I'm 5'7". So I was very perplexed by that experience. Now, was that a spirit? I don't know for sure, but it was definitely something I can't readily explain. So the jail has had, obviously a lot of different kinds of deaths, but so it's not so, I guess it's not a huge leap of faith to think that there might be some spirit activity in such a building. I know that I've spoken to security guards. Some will talk about their experiences in there, some will not. And things like footsteps, loud banging, have been heard. I've had other people tell me that they're aware of a woman pacing around on the second floor of the south wing. So maybe my experience has been validated. So, and also the scent of roses has been picked up downstairs in one of the solitary confinement cells. So that's kind of an interesting scent to pick up in such a horrific place. But apparently that's considered a positive thing, the smell of roses, that is. So that's a little bit on the Vaughan Street Jail. So I do hope you guys can come and visit me there sometime and have a look at it. Now, with regards to some other buildings, I will share with you. Let me just have a look here. Sorry, I'm just trying to think here. Well, I don't know if you've seen this building. Actually, we're very lucky that this building has been completely saved and fixed up and so on. This building is on Main Street by, as you can see, St. Mary Avenue. And this is the Fortune block, and it was built in 1881 and named after Mark Fortune. And the High and Lonesome Bar is still there. Espresso Joe's is gone, but that particular spot years ago used to be a hair salon. And the people who worked there kept having this very unnerving feeling that they were always being watched. And they definitely knew it wasn't their boss, because that at least they could account for. But it was like being watched by somebody they couldn't see. So as time went on, they just sort of had to live with it. And eventually management decided they wanted to renovate the place and spruce it up. So they hired this crew, and this crew came in and they started ripping out walls. And when they opened up one of the walls, they found something they were not expecting. No, not a body, but almost. They actually found a shriveled up index finger. Yeah. So apparently they disposed of this finger. Now, whether or not that means that they pitched it into the BFI bin out back, which I doubt, or maybe they gave the finger to the police. Maybe that didn't come out right. Maybe they gave the item to the officers. Yeah. So anyway, my understanding is that once this finger left the shop, that feeling of being watched faded away. Well, I think it's kind of an interesting story, that one for sure. But I will tell you that the Fortune block, as I said, was named after Mark Fortune. And Mark Fortune, he actually did pretty well for himself financially. He just unfortunately didn't get very far in his older years, because in 1912, this millionaire and his family went to Britain for a little trip. And when it was time to come home, there sitting in the harbor was this beautiful brand new ship called the Titanic. So, being the loving father that he was, he bought a fistful of tickets and away the family went. Kind of almost all the way home. Yeah, you might have heard about this. Apparently they ran into some trouble called a giant iceberg. So as the ship was going down, wife and daughter survived by being placed in lifeboats because they were first-class passengers. But 65-year-old Mark Fortune and their 19-year-old son Charles went down with the ship. Now, after their passing and the tragedy, the Fortune women returned to Winnipeg, and their house is actually still standing today on Wellington Crescent. It's the first house after you pass Munson Park, not on the side where the 529 restaurant is, same side of the street, but not on that end. It's on the opposite end. Anyway, it's a Tudor style looking house, and that belonged to the Fortunes. So it is said that after some time, the Fortunes left, but people who live in that house today have woken up hearing ghostly footsteps in the hallways. They believe that this is the ghost of Mark Fortune, who is looking for his family. So even though his body is lost at sea and was never recovered, he is still returning to Winnipeg and looking for his loved ones in his old home. So indeed, spirits can, it seems, move around quite efficiently. So, I mean, just think of the possibilities after we die. I mean, you can travel and never have to pay for a ticket again. I think this is actually a brilliant idea, but I'm not in any rush, mind you, but you know, you can certainly get an idea of things that you might be able to do. I'm just going to quickly look at some other locations for you, because I know we're coming down to our the end of our stories very soon. You know what? Last but not least, we've got to talk about this building here. So this, of course, is probably the most famous haunted building in Winnipeg, and that would be the Fort Garry Hotel. This hotel was completed in 1913, and it was constructed specifically to go with the train station just a block away. Now it's known as the Via Rail Station. And when this hotel was completed, it was host to some very impressive guests over the years, such as, would you believe, we had Harry Houdini, Walter Disney, Sir Laurence Olivier, this big actor. Oh gosh, Fanny Bryce. The Queen Mother was here in 1939. Now here's a question, and I won't know if anybody's putting their hand up or not, but if you've seen the movie, The King's Speech, I bet you can count on one hand how many times Winnipeg was actually mentioned in the movie. 0 times. And yet it was in Winnipeg that he made that speech. And the table he sat at is still sitting in the Lieutenant Governor's residence to this day. So they stayed at the hotel when they were here. Some modern names for maybe a few of you younger ones out there. We've got the late Robin Williams, Keanu Reeves, Don Cherry, Christy Alley, Bill Murray, Shirley MacLaine. Now she would have been an interesting person to ask what her experience was like in that hotel. Oh yes, and don't forget, there was also, remember when they made the movie, the Shall We Dance? So apparently when Jennifer Lopez stopped by, they had to actually widen out some of the door frames for her luggage, I think. So anyway, lots of famous people anyway. And indeed, the hotel is so well loved that some guests have decided never to leave. So the Fort Garry Hotel has a lot of spirits in it, for sure. There's a guy in the Provincial room. So when you walk in through the front door and you go to the right, that's the Provincial ballroom. And there's a guy who looks like he's in a Scottish uniform, wearing the kilt and the whole bit. And he's seen standing, gazing out of the windows. Across directly from the front door is the Palm Lounge. And they have talked about seeing a woman standing next to the grand piano. People wonder if maybe she was a former lounge singer for the hotel. Then when you come in through the front door and you go to the left, that would be the Broadway room. And it's said to be haunted by a spirit that's been nicknamed the Phantom Diner. Apparently, he likes to sit in the dark and eat dinner alone. Now, one night, a guy was hired, for being a waiter, I guess. And after working at the hotel for many months to maybe a year or more, he actually was standing by the kitchen after the dining room was shut down, and he heard the sound of cutlery on a plate coming from the dining room. So he goes and he peers through, through the door, and there's a guy sitting there eating alone in the dark. So the young waiter thinks, oh my gosh, I've forgotten about a customer. So he runs out to apologize and to see if there's anything more the man desired. But just as he approached the man sitting there, the guest just disappeared. Well, that young waiter was so terrified by what he had just experienced that he quit right there and refused to come back and work at the hotel again. So the Phantom Diamond. But indeed, I'd have to say the most famous spirit of all is the lady of room 202. Now, people have either heard about this woman's reputation, book it, hoping for something to happen in that room, or they get the room, know nothing about it, and find out the hard way. Now, you have to understand that you can book the ghost room, no problem, except for Halloween. I mean, you might have like a 3 or 4 year wait, but anyway, you can book it and enjoy it. But at the same time, if people come in from out of province or wherever, and they come into the hotel and that room is available, they will just deal with it like any other room. They hand you the key and off you go. They don't tell you that you're going to be staying in the ghost room. So, well, sometimes that works out quite well and nothing happens. Other times, well, let's just say, sometimes some guests leave in the middle of the night, still in their pajamas, demanding to be booked somewhere else and that they will return the next day to pick up their luggage. So who's haunting room 202? Well, it seems that people describe what looks like a young woman, maybe in her 20s, dressed like a bride. And she will, when you're in the bed, half asleep, you can hear her walking in the room. Sometimes she'll sit down on the bed, and she's even been known to lay down beside you. Apparently, you don't even have to pay extra for this. Now, I understand that she's been getting very bold over the last 5-6 years, I guess, because people are reporting not only is she in the bed with them, but she's actually rolling over, spooning them, and then putting her arm over them and giving them a little ghost squeeze. Ooh, no thanks. So, one of the urban legends about this lady is that she was married, went up to the room with her husband, but I guess, had a headache. So, he obviously wanted to enjoy the evening. So he said, no problem, I will go and get you some tablets. So it's said that he was running across Broadway and she was able to look out the window and watch him jaunt across. But I guess he was just so enamored by the excitement of the day, he was not paying attention. And apparently he got smacked by a trolley car. And she saw this and she was absolutely devastated in her grief, in her guilt. It said that she killed herself in the room. Now, some people suggest that maybe she took sleeping pills and that's why the bed is active, because that's where she died. Others suggest that perhaps she killed herself in the bathtub, which might account for the watery footprints that housekeeping have discovered when walking in several hours after people have checked out to turn the room over. And yeah, fresh, wet footprints are found on the floor. Other people, do you have to go now?
No, just keep going. Wrap up this story for sure, because I'm completely spellbound.
Okay. And then there's other people who have talked about hearing coat hangers clanking against each other in the closet. But the weird thing is, they sound like wire hangers, but in fact, today they're wooden hangers. And the light goes on in the closet. So indeed, we have kind of a mystery on our hands about what really happened to this woman. But maybe it doesn't really matter, because in the end, she seems to enjoy being in the room. She's obviously very friendly. And, it's just one of those unique experiences that you can totally get involved in and explore if you're interested in this sort of thing. So
Kristen, do you know if when she cuddles with someone, is it cold or is it warm? Do they know?
Well, all I know is that when one lady talked to me about this a couple of years ago, she and her sister actually booked the room and slept in the bed, and they put pillows down the center between them on the bed, thinking this would prevent the ghost from coming. Well, in the middle of the night, this one sister woke up. They were in their, I think, late 50s, 60s, something like that. And the one sister woke up because she felt like her sister was spooning her and hugging her. So I guess she's thinking temperature wise, it felt normal, right? But then she realized, wait a minute, she can still feel the pillows behind her. So she jumped out of the bed and she looked. Her sister is facing the opposite direction, like facing the other wall, snoring like a lumberjack, and there's nobody else in that bed. So yeah, she was very, I don't know what you would say, shaken, not stirred, but yeah, that was quite the experience, she said.
You gave us so many interesting stories that I'm sure that some people want to know a little bit more. And I have no doubt you've got more stories because there's so many old buildings in Manitoba. If people are interested in doing the tour with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, I think the best way to get a hold of me would be through email, to be honest, because I am in and out quite a bit. So send me that email, which is squarepegtours@yahoo.com. And basically, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't wait too long because we are selling out. We, meaning myself, for the Broadway Ghost Walk, which is the one I do. And then Matthew Comas, who is a two-time author on this subject matter, he does the Exchange District Ghost Walk, and I do the bookings for him as well.
So there's lots of opportunities to find out more spooky things. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You have me really interested in visiting some of these buildings that I've been in before, but maybe I wasn't listening close enough. So thank you. And thank you everyone else for joining us as well. And we'll be back next month with more interesting guests for you. Thanks for being here.